What I can tell you is we have some of the best people work on it, and I'd like to thank them for what they do. Right, let us move on. We now come to the urgent question. Kevan Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I ask the Secretary of State for Business and Trade if she will make a statement on the financial redress of sub-postmasters and the outstanding issues relating to the Post Office Horizon scandal?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a backbencher, I first spoke on this matter in terms of compensation for victims in March 2020, which is obviously is long after he's campaigned on it, and I pay tribute to his campaigning on this matter, which is undiminished, as is my appetite for compensation for postmasters, equally undiminished, although I accept we need to increase the pace of delivery of compensation claims. As of this month, £160 million has been paid in financial redress to over 2,700 victims affected by the Horizon scandal. Over 78% of eligible full claims received have been settled as follows. 102 convictions have been overturned and 42 full claims submitted, of which 32 have been settled. 2,793 applications to the Horizon shortfall scheme have been received, and 2,197 have been settled. 58 full claims have been submitted to the Group Litigation Order Scheme, and 41 have been settled. Our top priority remains that victims are able to access swift and fair compensation. We have introduced optional fixed sum awards at £600,000 for victims with overturned convictions and £75,000 for Group Litigation Order members as a swift means to settlement. 100% of original applicants to the Horizon shortfall scheme have received offers of compensation. We are discussing what other measures can be taken to speed up compensation with Horizon Compensation Advisory Board today, which the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for North Durham, sits upon. Since the Prime Minister's announcement on the 10th of January, officials in the Department for Business and Trade and the Ministry of Justice have been working at pace to progress legislation for overturning convictions related to the Post Office's prosecutorial behaviour and Horizon evidence. I will provide a further update to the House very soon.
Kevan Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I first of all thank you for granting the urgent question, and can I draw the House's attention to my interest as a member of the Horizon Compensation Board. I like the Minister. He's been campaigning on this before he was a Minister. He's been a very good Minister in a lot of that good work was undone on Monday by the Secretary of State's performance. But can I also say to him, I'm disappointed that he has not taken the opportunity today to talk about the overturned convictions. I understand later today at 12 o'clock there's a written ministerial statement actually on this issue, which I think is not the way to do it. This House needs an opportunity to be able to discuss those overturned convictions. So can I just ask him a few points? In terms of the overturned convictions, it's quite clear now that Nick Reed, the Post Office Chief, wrote to the Lord Chancellor opposing basically the overturn of all convictions, saying there's up to 300 people who, in quote, were guilty. Now, it's not clear yet who instructed him to do that. The Secretary of State on Monday said that it was off his own bat. I'd like to hear what the Minister has to say on that. And can I say to him that if we are going to have overturned convictions, it can't just be about the Horizon system. Evidence which I've now put into the public inquiry, which I sent to him yesterday, clearly indicates that the scandal predates Horizon in terms of capture. They need to be included both in the compensation scheme and also in any overturned convictions. And we are meeting this afternoon, and we made some recommendations to him in terms of how we can simplify and speed up the compensation scheme. Could he give an assurance to the House that once we've possibly agreed them today, we can announce them quite quickly to try and restore some faith in the sub-postmaster, which has been wrecked by the performance of the Secretary of State on Monday? And can I ask if in his written ministerial statement at 12 o'clock it is about overturned convictions, will he give a commitment to come back to the House on Monday to give an oral statement so that the House will be able to interrogate him and actually discuss that issue?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to thank him for his question. Obviously, in terms of the overturn convictions, that's a key priority for myself and my department. I'm always keen to update the House wherever I can. There's always be a sequence in terms of making sure that we follow a proper process, and some of these, what we're doing here, of course, also affects potentially our devolved administrations. Really important we engage with them properly, and that's one of the reasons why we need to do this as a written statement later today. I've never been unwilling to come before this House and report on what we're doing, and I'm continuing to do that, of course. In terms of the letter from the Chief Executive to the Justice Secretary, I'm aware of the allegations by Mr Staunton. These are very serious allegations, of course, and ones that should not be made lightly or based upon a vague recollection. And I think if he looks at the letter from the former Permanent Secretary, I think she's very clear that that these allegations she believes are incorrect. There was never any conversation along the lines that Mr Staunton referred to, and I think it's pretty clear those allegations are false. In terms of capture, he has regularly brought this up, and that's something we're keen to continue to engage with him on to make sure those are included within any compensation where detriment has occurred. I note his points about an oral statement. I say I'm always keen to do that whenever possible and to be interrogated in our plans. I don't think he'll be disappointed in terms of what we announce later today.
Paul Scully.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Now the then Permanent Secretary has outlined the fact that she did not implicitly or explicitly tell the then Chairman of the Post Office to slow down compensation. I hope we can spend less time talking about someone who has lost his job and more time spending about postmasters who have lost everything. Will the Minister, who's doing great work in sorting this out, recommit to August as being his target date of getting compensation out of the door as soon as possible, life-changing compensation?
Minister.
Well, I thank him for his question and for his work on this as my predecessor. He did a tremendous job. I think the best way the central allegation, the most concerning allegation we heard over the weekend was around delaying of compensation. If anyone reads the letter from the Permanent Secretary, which is publicly available, it's very clear. It is not true that I made any instruction either explicitly or implicitly. In fact, no mention of delaying compensation appears in either note. So I think he's absolutely right. We should move on from that and focus on what really matters, which is getting compensation, that life-changing compensation, as he puts it, to postmasters as quickly as possible. That is absolutely and will remain our number one priority.
Right. Let's come to Shadow Minister Singh Dhesi.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. First of all, I'd like to pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for North Durham, for securing today's urgent question, and indeed all of his work over many years and that of other right honourable members to try and secure justice for sub-postmasters. The Post Office Horizon scandal, Mr Speaker, is one of the most insidious injustices in our country's history. It has robbed innocent people of their livelihoods, their liberty, and all too sadly their lives. At least 60 sub-postmasters have died without seeing justice or receiving compensation, and at least 4 have taken their own lives. Over 20 years on, the victims and their families are still suffering from the consequences and the trauma of all they have been put through. They have been trapped in a nightmare for too long. We all want to see the exoneration of all remaining convictions and the delivery of rightful compensation to all those affected sub-postmasters as quickly as possible. Labour wants to see a swift and comprehensive solution to this insidious justice, and we are willing to work with the government to ensure this happens. So will the Minister please provide an update on the timeline that he is working to amend the seismic damage this scandal has caused? And can he also provide assurance that he is acting with the appropriate speed required for necessary legislation to go through? Victims have already waited for too long for injustice, and Mr Speaker, we must act now with speed and urgency that this awful scandal requires. Thank you.
Minister.
Well, I thank him for his questions and the way he's approached this. And there's nothing in his remarks that I disagree with. 78% of people, as I mentioned before, claimants have received full and final compensation. But his party's wished for swift end to this and a swift resolution to this is absolutely shared by us. We've engaged significantly and extensively with his colleagues on the front bench in terms of this particular matter, how we overturn convictions. Clearly, these are unprecedented measures we are taking, but this is an unprecedented situation. So the timeline we're working to, we always said, was weeks. It is fewer weeks now than it was. But so I don't think, as I say, he'll be disappointed, as I said to the right honourable member, the member for North Durham, in terms of what we say, hopefully later today. But it has taken too long. We're working on a daily basis to resolve these issues, and that overturning of convictions, the legislation and the compensation cannot come too quickly.
Reece Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend, the Minister, has done a great job on this, and I'm conscious, though, that there are still many people waiting to settle. And a lot of that is down to the fact that the Post Office is not releasing information that has been requested by my constituents or indeed their solicitors. I would hope that my honourable friend can put across to the Chief Executive of the Post Office how critical it is to regain trust in order to release this information, because my other fear is other sub-postmasters or people who might have been interested in dealing with the Post Office will start to either move away or not take up those business opportunities, which will also be damaging for communities, as is happening right now in my own constituency.
Minister.
Well, can I thank her for a question and a point? She's absolutely right. Disclosure both to the inquiry and in terms of individual cases that it's required to be able to compile claims has been too slow. I absolutely think it is incumbent on the Post Office and their management team, if they're going to rebuild trust with claimants and with the wider public, that this is done properly and the governance around that is done properly, and that's part of the reason why the Secretary of State acted so decisively as she did. But I absolutely concur with her, and I alongside her, urge the Post Office to deliver this disclosure more quickly.
SNP spokesperson Marion Fellows.
Speaker, okay. Documents published this week by the BBC reveal that the Swift review, dated February 2016, noted that the Post Office had always known about balancing transaction capability that allowed transactions to be addended remotely, and that happened. The lawyers for Post Office did nothing about that. Many people are still untrusting of Post Office Limited. There's been a letter circulated, and the Honourable Member of North Durham deserves all the praise we can give him today, and I have a copy of his memo that says anyone can write to him to get this any issue they have and get advice on how to pursue claims. Minister, you've given us a list of what's happened in percentages and so on, but it still isn't fast enough. It still isn't good enough, and one of the reasons is that Post Office Limited is still not trusted, and people want nothing to do with them. Now, I can't fix that, but I don't think the spat between the Secretary of State and Henry Staunton this week did anything to increase sub-postmasters' confidence in this, and we really need to get this sorted. Yes, Horizon Shortfall Scheme, it's been well managed in some regards, and claims are going through and being paid. But how much is being paid? So many sub-postmasters are getting derisory offers, not even just people in the GLO scheme, but normal, everyday sub-postmasters who've been putting money in for years. We need to get this sorted. I appeal as well to all sub-postmasters affected to put in a claim.
Well, I entirely agree with her on that point and a number of other points she raised, and I thank her again for the work she's done in this particular area for many, many years. And I too, of course, were concerned about some of the information that came to light this week, and the public inquiry is there to examine any allegations relating to who knew what when. I think it's wrong we duplicate their efforts, because there's a public inquiry which has the powers to summon witnesses to give evidence and other forms of evidence gathering, which I think is the right way to do this. I agree with that compensation can't come fast enough. and the Post Office Limited absolutely got to rebuild trust amongst not just amongst the wider public, but also key to this is the postmasters. In terms of how much, yes, of course, we want to make sure people get fair compensation. Can I just point gently to the performance so far of the group litigation order scheme? 58 full claims have been received, 48 offers have been made, 41 have been accepted without going to the next level, which is the independent panel. So it would tend to indicate those offers are fair because people have recourse to other to an effective appeal process. Now, I am aware of one or two high-profile cases that say they've not been offered fair amounts. I think we can't talk about individual cases, although I would say we urge any of those individuals to go to the next stage of the process, which is the independent panel. The whole scheme is overseen by Sir Ross Cranston, who has a very good reputation both in this House and further afield. We absolutely believe this process will offer fair compensation, but I say we urge people to return to the table and make sure that their claim is properly considered by all means available.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for all the work he's done on this issue, not only on the front bench but on the back benches as well. No amount of compensation can compensate those victims of this complete scandal. However, it does help, and obviously speeding up that process is important. But will he, during the passage of the legislation that the government has promised to bring forward, ensure that those victims who are completely innocent are not only compensated, but actually completely exonerated, because in their communities they've suffered the stigma attached with all this, and they need to have their names cleared and their reputations restored?
Minister.
Well, thank him for his point and his regular contributions to this particular subject, which he was frequently in here prior to the ITV series, and I appreciate his work he's done. And he's right to say no amount of compensation can make up for what's happened to many people's lives. So I absolutely agree with him on that point. In terms of all the innocent being exonerated, it's exactly what we want. We know there's a nervousness with some victims coming to the process, into a process that they don't trust, and they simply had enough. And we met with HoC, one of the solicitors, yesterday to talk about this particular issue, and it was their contention around 40% of the people who were written to say we won't oppose an appeal still would not come forward. We know we have to have a process that doesn't require people to come forward if we're going to have this mass exoneration of people who have been affected by the surrender scandal. That's exactly what we hope to announce later today.
Show the Select Committee, Liam Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the words of praise for the Minister and his speed and attention on this issue? But I want to raise the issue about what I think is a necessity for a legally binding instruction to deliver at speed on the Post Office and on the Department in the new bill. The Minister has told us today that about 160 million in compensation has been paid, but that's out of a provision of about 1.2 billion. That means that only 13% of the money has been paid over. The Minister gave us an update on the figures of claimants. There were obviously 555 people in the GLO group. There were 700 people that were convicted. Out of those two groups, the Minister has just told us only 73 have had compensation fully and finally paid. That's only 6% of those two groups. And then, of course, the confusion about who said what to who at the beginning of the week showed us that there was confusion about that instruction to deliver at speed. So will the Minister please, when the bill comes forward to this House, reflect on the necessity for a legally binding deadline under which the Post Office must make information available in 20 to 30 days, and an offer must be made to settle within 20 or 30 days, and then a legally binding deadline for final resolution. Otherwise, frankly, I'm worried that we will still have ambiguity causing for delay, and as he knows as well as I do, justice delayed is justice denied.
Minister.
Well, I can thank him for his points and his regular attention to this particular issue. I know he's got a session next week to asking some of those questions. In terms of, we are very keen to get compensation to victims as soon as possible. We are somewhat at the mercy of claims coming in, of course. We can't make an offer of compensation if claims come in. So, like others have called for, we're very keen for people to actually come forward and submit a claim. One of the reasons we have put forward the fixed sum awards of £600,000 for overturned convictions and £75,000 for the GLO scheme is trying to accelerate compensation to people, which tends to contradict some claims that people are trying to slow things down. I'm meeting with the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board this afternoon to look at their recommendations of how we accelerate compensation. We would take nothing off the table. I would remind him that we just recently voted as a House to extend the compensation deadline, but on the recommendation of Sir Wyn Williams, from I think it was the 4th of August, because we don't want people to be timed out of compensation. The maximum budget thus far has been set at £1 billion. In terms of people coming forward, one of the issues we have got that we're trying to resolve urgently is the fact that people are reluctant to come forward to have their convictions overturned through the appeal court. That's exactly one of the reasons why we haven't compensated enough people with convictions, because we can't compensate them until we overturn the convictions. That's exactly what the legislation we are proposing is. Once we've done that, it opens the doors to the compensation, so you can flow freely, which is exactly what he wants to see, what I want to see. Just in terms of the confusion about compensation, there was never a confusion in our minds, ever, about delivering this quickly. It's something I have focused on every single day since I've been in office and before that point in time. I've never been resisted ever by anybody in my department or indeed other parts of government. So there may be confusion, but I promise you it was not confusion within government.
Andy Carter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And can I add my own thanks to the Minister for the work that he has done to help me advise my constituents that have come forward asking many questions in relation to the situation they found themselves in. One of the areas that I'm very pleased to see the government doing work in is to compensate those postmasters that were convicted in a court of law. But there are many individuals that worked for the post office that faced disciplinary proceedings but did not end up finding themselves in court. But their professional reputations were trashed. They had no ability to find jobs when they were dismissed, and they were significantly out of pocket. The post office must know who they disciplined. They must have records through the disciplinary procedure. Can the Minister outline what steps the Post Office have taken to contact those individuals so that they can get the compensation that they rightly deserve?
Well, can I thank him again for representing so ably the people in his own constituency who have fallen victim to this particular scandal. People don't need to have gone before a court of law to be compensated. I think if you're a postmaster with a contract with the Post Office, you can access either Horizon Shortfall Scheme or the GLO. That does not require prosecution of any form to be able to claim through those schemes. I think he raises the point, potentially, of somebody who worked for a postmaster or worked for the Post Office. It's a separate point. I'm very happy to talk to him about this point. It's been raised by a number of members of this House. It's not necessarily the case that the Post Office would know if a postmaster who's working independently, runs an independent business, discipline their members of staff. So it may not be as straightforward as he sets out, but nevertheless, I'm very happy to engage with him on it.
Mr. Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The problem for many sub-postmasters and postmistresses, though, is the quantification of what they are due to be repaid under the shortfall scheme, because these were payments that were made out of their own pocket on several occasions over a long period of time. And it's difficult in these circumstances for the claimants to know that they have been properly compensated, because the Post Office themselves can't tell them how much they should be repaying. Taking a step back from this, is it not all apparent that really we can't continue to leave the Post Office to mark their own homework, and that the independent elements of scrutiny here need to be strengthened? Somebody independent of government and the Post Office has got to be put in charge, not just of sorting this out, but doing so at speed.
Yes, well, I agree with his points, and he's right to say quantification is very difficult. These situations are complex. It's not just about financial loss either. It's about personal impact. It can be health impact. It can be reputational, all those things. So on health or mental health or physical health. And of course, we should always, in those situations, give the claimant the benefit of the doubt where this can't be evidenced. in many cases these records are no longer available. In all parts of this process, we have independent people in this process. But the Horizon Shortfall Scheme, you've got eminent KCs, such as Lord Garnier from the other place, for example, who are members of that scheme. In the GLO scheme, overseeing that scheme, we have Sir Ross Cranston. In the overturn conviction schemes, we have Sir Gary Hickinbottom, all eminent retired High Court judges. I have great faith in them to make sure they do hold our feet to the fire and do get compensation to the right people, at to the right quantum at the right time. And indeed, also holding our feet to the fire is the Horizon Compensation Advisory Board with the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for North Durham, and indeed Lord Arbuthnot, is making sure we do the right thing and we do deliver compensation at the right amounts. And I'm meeting again with them later today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know the Minister means well, but I know he'll also understand that my affected constituents have had enough of being told the government are working hard to get them the justice they deserve and the promises of swift compensation. One of my constituents' claims was submitted in October. She heard the Minister in January say all claims would have offers within 40 days, yet she still hasn't had an offer. She's right to conclude that the allegations of delaying payments to benefit the Treasury are true, isn't she?
Minister.
No, I'm sorry she's taken that tone, but that's not true. And I did set out before, I did set out very clear. I think Henry Staunton has got this completely wrong. There's never been any situation while I've been in this role, and my predecessors have said the same, where we tried to delay compensation. That's not the case. I'm very happy to look at an individual case. And if she wants to write to me with that particular case, our commitment is on the GLO scheme that once we received a full claim, we'll respond to 90% of cases within 40 days. Some cases are more complex, but I'm very happy to look at a specific case, as I've done for other members of this House, and people have contacted us directly. So I'm very keen to make sure we get resolution to her case, a constituent's case, as quickly as possible.
Sir Christopher Cho.
Congratulate the Minister on his tenacity in relation to this issue. But can he tell us when he expects the inquiry to be completed? Because it seems that Fujitsu are hiding behind that inquiry and are being unwilling to commit themselves to compensating the taxpayer for the compensation that the taxpayer is going to be paying.
You raised a very important point, and I thank you for it. The inquiry is due to conclude by the end of this year, due to report sometime next year, hopefully early next year. At that point in time, we'll know more exactly what Fujitsu's role was in this, and indeed we'll know more in terms of what the final compensation bill is. I welcome the fact that before the Select Committee, Fujitsu acknowledged their moral obligation to the victims and indeed to the taxpayer in terms of contributing to the compensation bill, and we'll very much hold them to their promises with that regard.
Andrew Bridgen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister is a perceptive man. He must see the problem of he's here at the dispatch box on a Thursday to reassure the House after the reassurances of the Secretary of State at the dispatch box on a Monday that the House and the country's patience on this matter is actually wearing very thin. The victims in all of this, the sub-postmasters, many of them have had, like my constituents, had their lives blighted and scarred for well over a decade. And these delays to the compensation scheme are only exacerbating the pain and the problem. And the public can see a pattern here, Mr. Speaker, whether it's the Horizon Compensation Scheme, the infected blood compensation scheme, or the vaccine harm compensation. And it's not reflecting very well on the government, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Well, as I say, I've been the first to admit we wanted to deliver compensation more quickly than has happened in the past. I reiterate my earlier comments, 74% of the claimants have received full and final compensation. It's absolutely right that the remaining 26% do too, as well as more that may come forward, and I'm pleased to see we are seeing more come forward. There's never been a case of us trying to delay compensation. I don't believe there is a pattern here. These issues are complex, but we need much to accelerate this, and need much to accelerate the payments of compensation prior to the ITV series, and that's critical. The £600,000 fixed sum award, which has been very effective in delivering rapid compensation, was brought in last October. We were looking at the blanket overturning convictions some months before that series. We are absolutely trying to deliver this at pace. It is not always straightforward to do that, but it has my commitment that we will do everything possible to deliver that compensation as quickly as possible.
John Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Post Office Horizon scandal is now commonly called one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in British history. So many lives devastated, some lost. An inevitable consequence of that is to undermine public confidence in the Post Office, in technology as misrepresented by the Post Office and by Fiduci, and in his department, particularly following the performance, and I think that's the right word for it, of the Secretary of State on Monday. What is he doing to restore public confidence in the Post Office, in technology, and in his department? And does he recognise that swift payment of compensation is, of course, an important part of that?
Yes, I think it is the most important part of that, and I think it's absolutely right. The Secretary of State responded to some allegations. I think there were false allegations in the newspapers over the weekend, and I think those are very serious allegations. Not about the Secretary of State, I hasten to add. The allegations were about a civil servant, a senior civil servant, which the senior civil servant has been very clear those allegations are false. So I think the number one way we can give confidence to the people who might be submitting a claim or have submitted a claim is the fact that these processes do work for the vast majority of claimants. Of course, we want to improve them. And we also want to reassure them that there is independence running through every single part of these processes. That's the number one message we can give from this House, that people come forward, they will be treated fairly and as quickly, and they'll get compensation as quickly as we possibly can.
Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how can the public have trust in the government to stand up for whistleblowers when, by her own account, the Secretary of State attempted to cover up the departure of Henry Staunton?
I really don't think that's an accurate portrayal of events at all, and I think I'm very happy to talk to him about that particular issue. Henry Staunton, it was decided that Henry Staunton was no longer the right person to lead the Post Office. He then decided to make some allegations about what had happened during his tenure, which have proven, in my view, to be completely false. So I don't believe Mr. Staunton was a whistleblower. I think he spoke out. His allegations he made, I think, have been, as I say, clearly demonstrated to not be accurate. So I don't think that's an accurate portrayal. But the number one thing we are focused on now, we should all focus on, is making sure people are properly compensated, but also the inquiry is allowed to do its work and identifies those responsible, and those responsible, be they individuals or corporate, are held to account.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have a constituent who was part of the group litigation order who wasn't convicted because that process was paused in 2015. But my constituent has pretty much lost everything, having borrowed substantial amounts of money to make up the shortfall over a long period of time. Yeah. They've now been told that the £75,000 upfront payment would be net of any interim payment they've already received, and they're not confident to go forward with a full assessment because of some of the highly publicised, very low derisory compensations that have been offered. Can you offer my constituent any reassurance that it is worthwhile pursuing that extensive and independently assessed claim? Because my assessment is that they have lost significantly more than £75,000.
You're here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, if that is the case, you should definitely submit a claim, and I'm very happy to work with her and meet her and to talk about her particular constituent. I'm aware of some of the individuals who have come forward and said they've received derisory offers, and we urge them to engage with the rest of the process. It's not yet happened. There's an independent panel, and in terms of the GLO scheme. But I would again just point direct her to the actual compensation performance on the GLO scheme so far. 58 full claims received, 48 offers made, 41 offers accepted without reference to the independent panel, which would tend to indicate the offers being made are fair. But I understand constituents, our claimants, the people affected by this will not be satisfied of my assurances until they've gone through the process, and I urge her to urge her constituent to do exactly that.
Jim Chum.
Thank
Speaker, can I also add my thanks to the Minister for his very dedicated response to all of the questions that we ask, and also his energy to try and make this a success for those who have been victimised. In terms of those who have had to take out loans to repay monies that they never owed anyway, will calculations be carried out to allow them to repay not simply substantive amounts, but also monies borrowed from family, from friends, or banking institutes, and indeed the very interest that they had to pay on that?
Well, I can thank him for all the work he's done in this area. I think he's spoken in every single debate that I certainly responded to in this House on this particular matter, and that was the case as well. That was the case as well. There's been many of them. That has been the case as well. Every single debate across this House, you're right to say. But when we were working together, fighting for justice for banking victims too, and I pay tribute to all his work he's done in this House in all these different areas. Yes, absolutely. The key principle is somebody is returned to the position they would have been financially prior to the detriment taking place, prior to the impact taking place. So that could take into account, for example, consequential loss of any other pecuniary losses, financial losses, so as well as non-pecuniary losses, which are other impacts such as reputational or impacts on health. So the short answer to this question, absolutely yes.
That completes the urgent question. We now move to the next urgent question. I'll let the front benches change.